Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
My grandfather was in his very last few years. He was no longer very present. He would just sit with his caretakers. He didn't have many words left. What always amazed me is if you started to sing with him, suddenly he would start to wave his arms around, and sometimes a big smile would come on his face. And sometimes he would even start to sing. I don't know where the words came from, but he remembered the melodies. And he'd always loved to sing. He'd been an entrepreneur, and at a certain point, he owned the rights to the first karaoke machine called a singing machine. And so we would go from Sinatra, and then I would take him to Shalom Aleichem. And I always loved singing. When I started to sing Shalom Aleichem, something really deep would happen. His father had been a chazan, and there was a part of him that just seemed touched, and that sang and that felt it in a very different way. He'd had a massive stroke when he was in his late 60s, right after he retired, and spent the last 30 years of his life incapacitated and unable to communicate, which had been his greatest gift. But somehow singing just worked on this different part of his mind and made him come out. And they say that people who suffer strokes, who lose their ability to effectively communicate, can often still sing. Because singing isn't just language and rational mind, but it's coming from a different part of being. And it really interacts with a different part of a person. And our creative director and pianist, Jonathan Miller, has told me about choirs that he works with elderly folk who have memory loss and dementia. And singing is one of the only things that really completely just brings them out of what they're going through. And the family members speak about seeing their beloved one come back somehow for a period of time after every time they sing, because of what it does. What a miracle happens every time. And as a rabbi, one of the aspects that I often spend time with is people in their final days of their lives, final hours. What I find to be the most powerful moment often is singing with people in that time, chanting prayers or singing, and you can see they're just suddenly, it grips them and it takes them to a deeper part of themselves. And I believe it takes them to a place of peace and calm where they're in a good place for the transition. And this is the beauty and power of singing, that it connects us to our soul. And truly, as the Jewish people, we've been exiled from country to country so many times. And every time we couldn't take our homes, can't take our belongings. Sometimes we couldn't even take our Sifrei Torah, our Torah scrolls. What we could always do is take our songs with us. We could always take our melodies. And there's still Sephardic melodies that are sung that came from Spain, and after the exile from Spain, they were carried with them all around the Mediterranean and the world, and still being sung in New York, in London, because it conveys a part of the identity that's beyond other parts of culture and words. It tells a piece of our soul. We know the stories of Jews who walked to their deaths in a gas chamber singing Ani Ma'amin, I believe in the coming of the Messiah, even though he tarries. We can imagine how much strength that gave them to sing that at that moment. And we can also think in this country of the African American slaves who sang amidst all their endless oppression and endless suffering, waiting in the water, we shall overcome, freedom down by the riverside, and allow them to find that measure of hope. And this is part of what the experience of our parsha of this whole morning is trying to convey to us, where the people are, as we read in our very first Aliyah, they go through the greatest scare. They thought they'd escape, but there was Egypt coming up behind them. But then there's redemption. And as we read, they go through that nightmare, their slave owners coming to get them again, take them back to their fate, but suddenly the waters open and they walk through the parted waters. And nothing could express the ending of 400 years of slavery more than the song that they sang. Song of thanksgiving, of wonder, of triumph. As we read this morning, we have this custom that we added because it's something the whole of the children of Israel sang together. And the Midrash says that the people were just lifted out of their minds, out of their bodies, and just taken to a whole other reality. It was a prophecy that they were holding on to something else. And it could only be expressed through melody, it could only be expressed through that song. And song is still so precious to us. And what I wanted to bring to you is a sense also of what has been happening in Israel since October 7th, and that song in some ways has filled people's hearts and souls in a way words are not able to. And from the very beginning, people just started singing and didn't stop. The soldiers going down, some of them in their 30s, hadn't been in a uniform, especially wartime, for many, many years. But they were going down singing Guardian of Israel, Shomer Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai, saying the Shema, to evoke, believing maybe they had to evoke that deepest part of soul to go there. And so many Israeli artists just started touring the country, going from hospital to army base to even people's homes, impromptu, crashing a wedding and singing for them. Aviatar Banai, one of the well-known artists who would sing all the old songs of Israel. He didn't sing his songs, he didn't want to presume, but he sang all the old songs and just invited other people to sing with him. I mean, one of my favorite moments was, so Aviv Geffen was one of the well-known stars in Israel now in the 60s and 70s. And he recorded a song after October 7th. And then just before he released it was when all the hostages were released. And he'd heard that one of the hostages, a 17-year-old girl, had a really beautiful voice and had been trained her voice. So he brought her on to record the song with him. These are the words, quote, 7th of October 23. And since then we've been counting days. We will not be the same people again. We woke up suddenly to a black sunrise. It was not ready. From the south, the smoke rose from the houses, boys and girls, and the death that chased far away, looking for the main road and for God. Children who got up in the morning, they will no longer play in the yard. And since then it goes with us and never leaves, and nothing passes. Awake at night and cry during the day. I don't remember what day it is. The blackened heart and the growing crying, and to think we had peace while we fought each other, the enemy who saw how we were divided. Soldiers raced to the horizon, to the burning borders, and since then we also feel captive. Leaders try to reassure, and they say we will not give up. And I'm just waiting to see another abductee return, and nothing passes. Children got up in the morning, they will no longer play in the yard, and since then it goes with us and never leaves, and nothing passes. Very, very heavy words, but what was amazing was seeing them singing it, and seeing their soul just rise with the words, and seeing this girl who had been a hostage for 2 months in Gaza, singing it, and with all her heart, talking about looking for the road, looking for God. Incredibly moving and healing moments. And sometimes in those most painful and intense and also beautiful moments, words just can't capture what's inside of our souls. But song can lift us from despair to joy. It's why we're so blessed to be singing again together this morning for Musical Shabbat, as we do every Shabbat. Because we want to take that joy that comes from a different place and bring it into our lives and bring it into our wider world. Because when we sing, we really feel like the whole world is singing with us. I remember when my daughter was barely 1 year old, and she had a little book that played Vivaldi's 4 Seasons. And one day she opened it up, and suddenly she started to dance and sing with the music, and it was incredible. It felt like the whole universe was dancing with her at that moment. It was her way of sharing her soul with the whole universe. And in times such as these, what else can we do but try and share our being with each other and with the universe, and hoping that the Almighty One will respond and take our weight from our shoulders so we can find our way and do good in our world. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.